Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the last human families leave their homes on the planet below. The Earth defense ship Valiant hung in space above New Australia as transport ships carried away everything humans had built over 200 years. Children pressed their faces against the windows looking back at the only world they had ever known, while their parents tried not to cry. The message from Earth Command had been clear and simple. All humans must leave the outer territories within 6 months. The Galactic Council had voted and humanity was no longer welcome in most of the galaxy. They called humans too dangerous and too quick to fight. The other alien species wanted peace and they said humans brought only war. Lieutenant Lisa Harper walked up to Morrison with a datapad in her hands. Her face looked tired and sad like everyone else on the ship. She had friends on New Australia, and watching them leave hurt more than any battle wound. "Captain, the last transport is ready to go," she said quietly. 300 families and all their belongings packed into cargo holds. Some of these people were born down there. Their grandparents helped build those cities. Morrison nodded and looked at the planet one more time. Green fields stretched to the horizon where human farmers had grown food for a dozen worlds. Cities with clean white buildings rose from valleys that had been empty wilderness when the first human ships arrived. All of it would go to the Zephyrians now, who had promised to take good care of human settlements. Admiral Carlos Bennett appeared on the main screen from his command ship in orbit around the gas giant. His gray hair and lined face showed the stress of the past few months. Bennett had fought in 3 wars to keep the galaxy safe, and now he was being forced to abandon everything they had protected. "Morrison, we need to move to the Kepler mining stations next," Bennett said through the communication link. "The Vegan Coalition wants us out of there by tomorrow. They say our mining equipment is too aggressive and damages the asteroid fields." "Too aggressive," Morrison repeated with a bitter laugh. "We built those mining stations to supply materials for the defense platforms that kept Krex raiders from attacking their worlds. Now they want us gone, but they are keeping all our equipment." The irony was not lost on any of the human crews. For 2 centuries, humans had been the peacekeepers of the galaxy. When the brutal Krex Imperium invaded peaceful worlds, humans had fought them back. When space pirates attacked trade routes, human patrol ships hunted them down. When disputes arose between alien species, human diplomats helped find solutions. But 6 months ago, everything changed. A human patrol ship had found Zephyrian slavers transporting a cargo hold full of captured aliens from a primitive world. The human captain had demanded the release of the prisoners. When the slavers refused, the humans had disabled their ship and freed the captives. The Zephyrian government called it an act of war. They claimed humans had no right to interfere in their internal affairs. Other alien governments agreed. Soon, the whole galaxy was talking about the human problem. They said humans were too quick to use force and too willing to fight. They painted every human action as aggressive and dangerous. Commander Ryan Torres came onto the bridge carrying his engineering reports. The tall man looked angry as he always did when they talked about the withdrawal. Torres had spent 15 years building the defense networks that protected the outer colonies. Now he was being forced to dismantle everything he had created. "Sir, the power cores from the orbital defense platforms have been transferred to the Altarian ships," Torres reported. "They say they need them for peaceful energy production, but we all know they will use them for weapons if the Krex come back." Dr. Helen Cross looked up from her research station near the back of the bridge. The xenobiologist had spent her career studying alien life forms and helping different species understand each other. She knew more about galactic politics than most diplomats, and her opinion carried weight with the crew. "Captain, I have been reading the reports from the council meetings on Centauri Prime," she said, while scrolling through her data tablet. The vote was not even close. 847 species voted to remove humans from contested territories. Only 23 voted against the motion. "Which species supported us?" Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. "The Terran Alliance colonies, of course, and 2 minor species from the Far Rim Cross," replied. "Everyone else either voted against us or abstained. Even species we saved from extinction voted for our removal." Morrison felt anger building in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would not help anyone. and it would only prove the aliens were right about human aggression. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best response to injustice was quiet dignity. The communication board lit up with an incoming message from New Australia. Governor Martinez appeared on the screen looking tired and defeated. She had run the human colony for 12 years and turned it into one of the most prosperous agricultural worlds in the sector. Captain Morrison, this is our final transmission. From New Australia, Martinez said formally. All human personnel have been evacuated and all equipment has been transferred to Zephyrian control as required by the Peaceful Separation Accord. I am transmitting the final status reports to your ship. Governor, you did good work down there, Morrison replied. The colony will be remembered as one of humanity's greatest achievements. Martinez smiled sadly through the screen. Thank you, Captain. I hope whoever comes after us appreciates what we built. Tell Admiral Bennett that the deep space sensors are still active. We left them running in case anyone needs early warning about threats from the outer rim. The transmission ended, and Morrison stared at the empty screen. The deep space sensors were part of a network humans had built to watch for dangers the other species could not imagine. The aliens called the sensors part of the human war machine, but they were really just an early warning system against the unknown. Lieutenant Harper brought Morrison the final evacuation report. Sir, all human personnel and civilian families have been removed from the New Australia system. The last transport ship is requesting permission to depart. Morrison took one final look at the planet below, rolling green hills and blue oceans that had supported millions of people for generations, cities that had housed families for 200 years. Farms that had fed half the galaxy during the food shortage crisis 20 years ago. All of it abandoned because the galaxy feared human strength more than they valued human protection. Signal the transport ships, Morrison ordered. Tell them to set course for Earth and send a message to Admiral Bennett. Tell him Phase 1 of the withdrawal is complete. As the human ships turned away from New Australia, Morrison wondered what would happen to the galaxy now. Humans had been more than protectors and peacekeepers. They had been the ones willing to fight when fighting was necessary. They had been the shield between civilization and the darkness beyond the known stars. The aliens wanted peace, but Morrison knew that peace often came at a price. Soon the galaxy would learn what that price truly was. The first refugees arrived at Earth 3 weeks after the Altarian system went dark, and their condition shocked even experienced human rescue teams. Commander Lucy Stevens of the Earth Border Patrol intercepted the lead ship just beyond Jupiter's outer moons where her crew prepared to process what they expected would be standard asylum seekers. Instead, they found beings so traumatized that many could not speak coherently about what they had witnessed. The refugee ship Bright Hope carried survivors from 12 different species all crammed into cargo holds designed for freight rather than passengers. Many had been injured during their escape, but their physical wounds seemed minor compared to the psychological damage. Captain Jector of the Altarian merchant fleet was among the few survivors who could provide a clear account of events. The tall, blue-skinned alien sat in the medical bay of Stevens's ship, shaking uncontrollably as he spoke to the human debriefing team. His large eyes darted constantly toward the windows, as if expecting attack at any moment. They came from nowhere, Jector whispered in broken standard as Colonel Peter Grant recorded his testimony. Ships like holes in space that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. We detected no engine signatures and no communication attempts. They simply appeared at the edge of our system and began their work. What kind of work? Grant asked. Gently. The colonel had interviewed thousands of war refugees during his career, but he had never seen beings this completely broken by fear. Harvesting, Jector replied, and his voice became even quieter. They harvested everything. The planets, the space stations, the orbital farms, the asteroid mining platforms. They stripped entire worlds down to bedrock and moved the material into their ships. But worst of all, they harvested the people. Dr. Helen Cross sat forward in her chair as she studied video footage the refugees had managed to capture during their escape. The images showed massive dark vessels unlike anything in galactic databases. They moved with organic fluidity, rather than mechanical precision, and seemed to grow larger as they consumed matter. "Captain, these do not appear to be ships in any conventional sense," Cross said as she enhanced the video images. "They look more like enormous space-dwelling organisms, living creatures that feed on entire planetary systems." Grant paused the recording and looked at the terrified alien captain. "You mentioned that your defense forces tried to stop them. What happened to the Zephyrian fleet that was stationed in your system?" 47 ships, Jector replied. "The pride of the Zephyrian military with their most advanced weapons and shields. They lasted 6 minutes against a single harvester organism. The creature simply absorbed their weapons fire and used the energy to grow larger. When it reached out with those terrible feeding appendages, the ships dissolved like ice in boiling water. On Earth, President Foster convened an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council in the secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been built during the early days of human space exploration, when Earth still feared invasion from unknown alien species. Now it seemed that old fear had been justified. Admiral Carlos Bennett stood before a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked systems that had gone completely dark, while yellow areas indicated regions under attack. Green zones showing safe territory grew smaller each day as the crisis spread. "Madam President, the entities are expanding faster than our worst projections," Bennett reported. "Our xenobiology teams have designated them devourers based on their apparent feeding behavior. They have consumed 8 major systems in the past month, and their rate of expansion is accelerating." "What response has come from the Galactic Council?" Foster asked, though she already suspected the answer would be inadequate. "The Council has voted to address the crisis through diplomatic channels," Bennett replied with barely hidden disgust. "They dispatched a delegation to attempt communication with the Devourers. The delegation was consumed yesterday along with their entire escort fleet." Commander Ryan Torres, now captain of the advanced Earth vessel Guardian, raised his hand to speak. His ship was one of several new designs that had been built during the 5 years since human withdrawal. The vessels incorporated technologies that had been theoretical when humans first left the outer territories. "Madam President, what about the contingency protocols we developed during the withdrawal?" Torres asked. "Project Deep Watch and the other classified programs we initiated after leaving galactic space." The room fell silent as Foster considered whether to reveal secrets that had been carefully guarded for 5 years. Around the table sat men and women who had spent half a decade preparing for exactly this type of scenario, while the rest of the galaxy celebrated human absence. "Admiral Bennett, please activate the Deep Watch monitoring network," Foster ordered. "It is time to show our people what we have been building while the galaxy forgot about us." Bennett input his authorization codes into the secure terminal, and the holographic display changed to show a different view of galactic space. Hidden monitoring stations appeared throughout former human territory, along with concealed shipyards and camouflage defense platforms that had been constructed in secret over the past 5 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster announced, "humanity never actually abandoned our responsibility to protect galactic civilization. We simply learned to fulfill that responsibility more quietly." Dr. Kevin Walsh appeared on the main communication screen from his monitoring facility in Switzerland. Behind him, banks of computers tracked energy signatures from across the galaxy, while automated systems analyzed threat patterns in real time. "Madam President, the Devourers have changed their attack pattern," Walsh reported urgently. "They are no longer consuming systems randomly. They appear to be targeting the population and industrial centers that alien governments established in former human territories." "Of course they are," Foster realized with growing alarm. "When we withdrew, the other species moved their most valuable assets into the space we abandoned. They concentrated their populations and resources in exactly the areas we had been defending." "Admiral." Bennett nodded grimly as he understood the implications. "They made themselves perfect targets. During the withdrawal, they dismantled our early warning networks and eliminated our defensive installations. Then they packed their most important assets into undefended systems." The communication board activated with an incoming transmission. From the emergency government of the Zephyrian Confederation, Chancellor Vexenari appeared on the screen, flanked by representatives from every major surviving alien government. His usual diplomatic composure had been replaced by obvious desperation. President Foster. Vexenari began without the customary, formal greetings. We are transmitting on all frequencies hoping to reach the Terran government. Our previous policies regarding human territorial restrictions are hereby suspended indefinitely. Foster exchanged glances with her staff before responding. Chancellor, what exactly are you requesting from Earth? We are requesting immediate military assistance, replied Ambassador Kethvar of the Altarian survivors. Our combined defense forces cannot slow these devourer entities. We have lost 17 systems in the past week, and our remaining fleets are in full retreat. Military assistance, Foster repeated carefully. The same type of military intervention that your governments classified as dangerous human aggression 5 years ago. The alien leaders on the screen looked uncomfortable, but Chancellor Vexenari pressed forward with his request. President Foster, our previous concerns about human military doctrine may have been overstated. We now recognize that your species possesses defensive capabilities that we lack. What we possess, Foster corrected, is a willingness to prepare for threats that civilized species prefer to ignore. What we possess is the understanding that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. Dr. Cross spoke from her position at the scientific station. Madam President, our analysis suggests the devourers have been observing galactic civilization for decades. They waited until our defensive networks were dismantled before beginning their harvest. This was a planned invasion, not a random encounter. They were waiting for us to leave, Admiral Bennett concluded. The devourers knew that humanity was the primary military threat to their expansion. Once we were removed from the outer territories, they were free to begin harvesting. Foster stood and walked to the main display showing the shrinking areas of free space in the galaxy. Billions of beings faced extinction because their governments had chosen political convenience over hard truths about the nature of cosmic threats. Chancellor Vexenari. Foster said finally, 5 years ago, your governments voted to remove humanity from contested territories because you found our military preparations excessive and our defensive doctrines aggressive. Today, you are asking us to save the galaxy using exactly those same preparations and doctrines. We were wrong, Vexenari admitted with obvious difficulty. We see that now. Your species understood threats that we chose to ignore. Foster nodded slowly as she considered the magnitude of what the aliens were requesting. They wanted humanity to emerge from isolation and fight a war against enemies beyond anything the galaxy had previously faced. They wanted the human military, machine they had spent 5 years trying to eliminate. The first sign that humanity had never truly abandoned the galaxy came when the massive devourer swarm advancing on the Centauri colonies suddenly found their path blocked by a defensive grid that materialized from empty space. Energy barriers and weapons platforms appeared as if the void itself had awakened to resist the alien harvest. Captain Ryan Torres commanded the operation from the bridge of the Earth defense ship Retribution, a vessel 3 times larger than anything the galaxy had seen humanity deploy during their original peacekeeping operations. The ship's stealth systems had kept it hidden in the outer system for 2 years, while its crew monitored devourer expansion patterns and prepared for this moment. All Deep Watch stations report full activation, announced Lieutenant Susan Harris from the communication station. We have complete sensor coverage across 47 star systems and all automated defense platforms are online. The defensive network that emerged from concealment had been 5 years in construction. Hidden shipyards scattered throughout human. Space had produced vessels designed specifically for fighting the type of enemy that conventional galactic military forces could not comprehend. Every weapon system had been tested against simulated devourer biosignatures. Every defensive strategy had been refined through countless combat scenarios. Admiral Bennett coordinated the overall campaign from the newly revealed Earth Command Center, a facility that rivaled anything the Galactic Council had ever constructed. Banks of computers tracked every devourer entity in known space, while automated systems calculated optimal engagement strategies in real time. Phase 1 deployment is complete, Bennett announced to the assembled fleet commanders. All civilian populations in contested zones have been evacuated to hardened shelter facilities. We are clear to begin Phase 2 operations. Commander Kate Williams of the Intelligence Division appeared on the tactical display with updated threat assessments. Sir, the devourers are adapting to our presence faster than projected. They are avoiding obvious defensive choke points and targeting refugee centers instead of military installations. Then we proceed to Phase 3, Bennett replied, without hesitation. Signal all Shadow Fleet vessels to begin direct engagement protocols. What the galaxy witnessed next became known as the day the humans returned. Warships emerged from hidden bases throughout the outer territories, not the patrol vessels and transports that alien governments remembered, but purpose-built combat vessels, designed for a war the rest of the galaxy had never imagined fighting. The Earth defense ship Vengeance decloaked directly in the path of the primary Devourer formation threatening the Zephyrian homeworld. Captain Lisa Harper now commanding her own vessel opened fire with weapons that had been theoretical concepts when humanity first withdrew from galactic affairs. Target the central biomass concentrations, Harper ordered as her crew initiated combat procedures they had practiced for years in secret. Quantum disruptors at maximum yield. All batteries commence firing. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer entities that had absorbed every weapon the galactic species could deploy began to dissolve under sustained assault from human quantum disruptor arrays. The massive bioships writhed and contracted as their cellular structures were torn apart at the molecular level. Direct hits on primary targets, reported the tactical officer. Devourer biomass is decreasing and they are beginning to retreat from the engagement zone. Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human vessels engaged Devourer formations with weapons and tactics that proved devastatingly effective. The quantum disruptors had been developed specifically to counter biomechanical entities after human scientists studied fragments recovered from the original, lost exploration vessels. President Foster addressed the galaxy from Earth's Defense Headquarters, a facility that had been expanded and upgraded during the 5 years of apparent isolation. Behind her holographic displays showed the progress of human forces as they systematically eliminated Devourer entities throughout occupied space. Citizens of the galaxy, this is President Foster of the Terran Federation, she announced to an audience that included every surviving government and billions of individual beings. We apologize for the deception, but humanity never abandoned its duty to protect galactic civilization. We simply learned to fulfill that duty more quietly. The campaign that followed lasted 6 months and demonstrated capabilities that shocked even humanity's former allies. Human forces deployed technologies that had been developed in absolute secrecy, including stealth systems that could hide entire fleets and weapons that could destroy targets the size of small moons. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, commanded the largest human fleet from the bridge of the Earth defense ship Vigilant as it patrolled former Devourer territory. The veteran officer had overseen the original withdrawal, and now he supervised the final cleanup operations that would secure the galaxy against future threats. All sectors report successful elimination of Devourer entities, Morrison announced to Earth Command. Biomass destruction is complete, and we have confirmed sterilization of 17 primary breeding sites. The scope of human preparation became clear as the campaign progressed. Hidden facilities throughout the galaxy had been monitoring alien activities and tracking potential threats for years. Automated defense systems had been installed around critical locations without the knowledge of local governments. Human intelligence networks had penetrated every major alien organization. Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from 3 surviving Devourer colonies, reported the communications officer. They are requesting negotiated settlement rather than continued resistance. Negative, Morrison replied firmly. These entities have demonstrated their intention to harvest all organic life in the galaxy. There can be no negotiation with an existential threat to galactic civilization. The final battle took place in the void sectors, where the Devourers had originated their invasion. Human forces led by Admiral Bennett personally eliminated the last breeding colonies and destroyed the organic infrastructure that had supported the alien expansion. When the operation concluded, no trace remained of the species that had nearly consumed the galaxy. Chancellor Vexenari addressed the post-war conference on New Geneva with words that few alien leaders could have imagined speaking before the crisis. The Terran Federation has demonstrated capabilities that exceed our previous understanding. We formally request that humanity assume permanent responsibility for galactic security operations. President Foster smiled as she considered the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Chancellor, 6 months ago you viewed human military capabilities as excessive and dangerous. Today you are asking us to make those capabilities permanent. We have learned the difference between aggression and strength, Vexnari replied. We have learned that peace requires guardians willing to face threats that peaceful species cannot comprehend. The new Galactic Accords established humanity as the official guardians of galactic security, with unlimited authority to maintain defensive installations throughout known space. Human forces would monitor all potential threats and respond to crises without requiring approval from civilian governments. You could have conquered all of us, Ambassador Kethavar admitted during the treaty negotiations. Your hidden fleets and secret weapons could have overwhelmed any resistance we might have offered. Conquest was never our objective, Foster explained patiently. We withdrew when you asked us to withdraw. We returned when you needed us to return. The choice was always yours to make. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship watching. Human patrol vessels resumed their eternal watch over the space lanes that connected galactic civilization. The withdrawal had ended, and humanity had returned to its role as protector of species too civilized to protect themselves. Admiral, we are receiving reports of unusual energy signatures from the far rim territories, announced the sensor officer. Possible indications of another unknown threat developing beyond monitored space. Morrison nodded calmly as he activated the alert protocols that would mobilize human forces throughout the galaxy. Signal all Deep Watch stations to increase monitoring of the target zone. Notify Earth Command that we may have a new situation developing. The galaxy had learned that some problems could only be solved by those willing to think like warriors. They had learned that peace was not a natural state, but a carefully maintained balance requiring constant vigilance. Most importantly, they had learned that asking your protectors to leave was the most dangerous mistake a civilization could make. Humanity had stepped back quietly when the galaxy demanded isolation. When the galaxy paid the price for that decision, humanity had been ready to step forward again. The question that remained was whether galactic civilization would be wise enough to never repeat that mistake. As Admiral Morrison watched the stars, beyond his viewport he reflected on the lessons of the past 5 years. Peace was fragile, and freedom required eternal vigilance. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, new threats were always emerging. But now the galaxy understood that humanity would be watching and waiting no matter what challenges arose. The shield had returned, and this time it would never be withdrawn again. The emergency broadcast reached every surviving government in the galaxy, simultaneously carrying a message that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Emergency Chancellor Vexnari of the surviving Council worlds appeared on communication, screens across dozens of star systems with words that tasted bitter in his mouth. This is an official request for immediate military intervention from the Terran Federation, Vexnari announced to beings who had voted overwhelmingly to expel humanity from galactic affairs. All previous territorial restrictions and military limitations placed upon human forces are hereby permanently suspended. We formally request that Earth assume primary responsibility for galactic defense operations. On Earth, the message was received in the war room deep beneath the Colorado Mountains, where President Foster listened with grim satisfaction as species after species begged for help from the same humans they had called dangerous warmongers. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. 6 months ago, we were unfit for civilized society, commented General Alex Parker, who had been appointed head of the newly created Galactic Operations Division. Today we are the galaxy's only hope of survival. The speed of that transformation would be amusing if the situation were not so desperate. Admiral Bennett activated updated intelligence displays showing the true scope of the crisis facing galactic civilization. The devourer entities had consumed nearly 70% of inhabited space and showed no signs of slowing their expansion. Worse, their feeding behavior was making them larger and more powerful with each system they harvested. The surviving governments have retreated to their core worlds, Bennett reported, but their defensive strategies are fundamentally flawed. They are trying to protect everything at once, rather than establishing strategic strong points. Without proper military doctrine, they will be extinct within months. Captain Lucy Stevens, commanding the reconnaissance vessel, Defiant, transmitted her latest intelligence report from the Outer Rim territories where she had been monitoring devourer expansion patterns. Her findings confirmed humanity's worst fears about the nature of the threat they faced. Admiral, the devourers are not attacking randomly, Stevens reported via secure communication link. They are specifically targeting the technological and population centers that alien governments concentrated in former human space. Every major colony world and industrial facility that was established after our withdrawal has become a primary target. Dr. Cross nodded from her analysis station where she had been studying captured devourer biomatter. It makes perfect strategic sense. When humanity withdrew from the outer territories, the other species moved their most valuable assets into what they considered newly available space. From their perspective, it was logical expansion. From the devourers' perspective, it was perfect target concentration. They made themselves defenseless and then painted targets on everything they valued most, Foster realized. When we left, they dismantled our early warning systems and removed our defensive installations. Then they concentrated their populations in exactly the areas we had been protecting. The communication board lit up with incoming transmissions from desperate alien governments. Chancellor Vexenari reappeared on the main screen surrounded by representatives from every surviving major species. His usual diplomatic composure had been completely abandoned in favor of naked desperation. President Foster, we are prepared to offer territorial concessions, resource rights, and technology transfers in exchange for immediate military assistance, Vexenari announced. We will grant humanity permanent basing rights throughout the galaxy and full authority over defensive installations. Ambassador Kethvar of the Altarian refugee government leaned forward with obvious urgency. We are offering you everything we denied you 5 years ago. Unlimited military authority, no restrictions on defensive preparations, and complete autonomy in threat assessment and response protocols. Foster exchanged meaningful glances with her military advisors before responding. The aliens were offering more power and authority than humanity had ever possessed during the original peacekeeping era. They were essentially requesting that humans become the permanent guardians of galactic civilization. Chancellor, you are asking us to accept responsibility for protecting species that voted to exclude us from their territories, Foster replied, carefully. You are requesting that we risk human lives to defend worlds that declared us unwelcome. Why should we agree to such an arrangement? Because you are the only species with the military capability to stop the devourers, Vexenari answered. Honestly, our combined fleets cannot match a single devourer entity. Your species has weapons and tactics that we never developed because we chose to focus on peaceful pursuits rather than military preparation. You chose to focus on peaceful pursuits because you assumed we would handle the military preparation for you, Foster corrected. You enjoyed the benefits of galactic security while criticizing those who provided it. General Parker activated classified displays showing the full extent of humanity's secret military development during the 5 years of isolation. Hidden shipyards throughout human space had been producing vessels designed specifically for the type of threat the devourers represented. Automated defense networks had been installed around every human world. Advanced weapons systems had been tested and deployed. Madam President, we should inform them about Project Deepwatch and the Shadow Fleet, Parker suggested. They need to understand that we never actually stopped protecting the galaxy. Foster nodded and authorized the revelation of classified information that had been carefully guarded since the withdrawal began. Chancellor, we never abandoned our responsibility to defend galactic civilization. We simply learned to fulfill that responsibility without your permission or approval. The display screens showed alien representatives a view of the galaxy they had never imagined. Hidden monitoring stations tracked every major threat, while concealed shipyards produced vessels more advanced than anything the galactic governments possessed. Camouflage defense platforms protected strategic locations throughout space that aliens believed was empty. You have been building a secret military empire, accused Ambassador Theclor of the Vegan Coalition with obvious shock and anger. We have been quietly preparing for exactly the type of threat you are now facing, Foster replied without apology. We have been doing the job you hired us to do and then fired us for doing too well. Admiral Bennett stepped forward to address the alien leaders directly. Every government represented in this transmission voted to remove human military presence from contested territories. You voted to dismantle our early warning networks and eliminate our defensive installations. You voted to classify our threat assessment protocols as aggressive and unacceptable. We were wrong, Chancellor Vexnari admitted with obvious difficulty. We see that now. We believed that galactic civilization had evolved beyond the need for military preparedness. We thought that advanced species could coexist peacefully without the threat of force. Peace is not the absence of conflict, Foster explained patiently. Peace is the presence of strength sufficient to deter those who would break it. You wanted the benefits of peace without accepting the costs of maintaining it. Dr. Walsh appeared on a secondary communication screen from his monitoring facility, where automated systems tracked devourer movement throughout the galaxy. His expression showed the urgency of the tactical situation facing all surviving civilizations. Madam President, the devourers have accelerated their expansion schedule, Walsh reported. They are now consuming 2 systems per day, and their mass is approaching critical mass for exponential reproduction. If we do not intervene within the next 72 hours, they will become unstoppable. Foster turned back to the alien representatives who waited anxiously for her response to their desperate request. Chancellor, we will provide military assistance, but there will be conditions. Humanity will have complete authority over all defensive operations. All surviving governments will provide full cooperation with human military commands. And most importantly, there will be no interference with human tactical decisions regardless of their political implications. Agreed, Vexnari replied immediately. Whatever conditions you require, we will accept. We simply need you to save what remains of galactic civilization. Very well, Foster announced. Admiral Bennett, please begin Operation Deep Return. Signal all Shadow Fleet vessels to decloak and begin immediate combat operations against devourer entities. Yes, Madam President, Bennett replied with satisfaction. All units, this is Earth Command. Project Deep Watch is now active. Humanity has returned to defend the galaxy. Foster looked at the alien leaders one final time before ending the transmission. Chancellor, you asked us to step back quietly 5 years ago. We did as you requested while continuing to guard against threats you could not imagine. Now you will see what happens when humanity steps forward loudly. 5 years had passed since the last human ship left the outer territories, and the galaxy seemed more peaceful than anyone could remember. Trade routes bustled with alien merchants carrying goods between worlds that had once relied on human protection. The Zephyrian Confederation expanded their territory into 40% of former human space, while the Vegan Coalition established profitable mining operations in systems humans had abandoned. On Earth, President Amanda Foster stood before the Global Council in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in Geneva. The massive hall buzzed with quiet conversation as representatives from every human colony and settlement waited to hear her annual address. Outside the tall windows, Lake Geneva sparkled in the afternoon sun while transport ships moved peacefully through the sky. My fellow citizens, Foster began as the hall fell silent. I am pleased to report that our withdrawal from contested galactic territories has brought unexpected benefits to our own worlds. Our colonies in the Centauri system report agricultural output has increased 30% since we focused our resources on human space, rather than galactic peacekeeping duties. Scattered applause filled the hall, but Foster noticed that many faces showed doubt rather than celebration. The forced withdrawal had hurt human pride, even if it had helped human prosperity. Many people still felt bitter about abandoning worlds their families had built over generations. Our mining operations in the Sol system have doubled their output, Foster continued, and our shipyards are producing more vessels than ever before. Without the burden of maintaining defense networks across the galaxy, we have been able to invest in our own infrastructure and technology. In a hidden facility beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Kevin Walsh stared at computer screens that showed readings from the deep edge of known space. The Deep Space Monitoring Division had been created after the withdrawal to keep watch on threats the rest of the galaxy might miss. What Walsh saw on his instruments made his blood run cold. "Director Martinez, you need to see this immediately," Walsh called across the underground control room. The facility looked like something from a science fiction movie with banks of computers and holographic displays showing star maps of the entire galaxy. Director Sophie Martinez walked quickly to Walsh's station. She had been one of the few people who voted against complete withdrawal from galactic affairs. Martinez believed humans should have maintained at least some monitoring presence in disputed territories, even if other species objected. "What do you have, Kevin?" Martinez asked as she studied the energy readings on Walsh's screens. "Massive energy signatures from the void sectors," Walsh replied, pointing to the display. "The same regions where we lost contact with deep space exploration vessels 20 years ago. Before the withdrawal, we assumed those ships were destroyed by natural phenomena or equipment failure." Martinez frowned as she examined the data. The energy patterns were unlike anything in their databases. They showed organized movement and deliberate patterns that suggested intelligence rather than random cosmic events. "When did this activity begin?" Martinez asked. 18 months ago, but the intensity has been increasing every week," Walsh answered. "Director, these are not natural phenomena. Something large and organized is moving in the outer darkness, something that has been building strength while we focused on internal affairs." Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. During her years as a diplomatic liaison, she had learned to trust her instincts about threats. The patterns Walsh showed her looked like preparation for invasion on a scale the galaxy had never seen. "Have we attempted to contact the Galactic Council about these readings?" Martinez asked, though she already suspected the answer. "3 times, Walsh replied with frustration in his voice. "They classified our communications as unsolicited interference in galactic affairs. The Zephyrian ambassador told us that continued attempts to share intelligence would result in economic sanctions against human trade. They think we are trying to create a crisis so we can return as peacekeepers," Martinez realized. Meanwhile, on the planet that had once been called New Australia, but was now known as Zephyr Prime, alien colonists were discovering why humans had built such extensive defensive networks around their settlements. The early warning systems had been dismantled as unnecessary military installations, and the deep space sensors had been sold for scrap metal. Governor Vex High of the Zephyrian Colonial Administration stood in his office looking out at the human cities his people had inherited. The buildings were well designed and the infrastructure was more advanced than anything his own people could have built. But there were things about human construction that puzzled him. Every human settlement included underground shelters that could house the entire population. Every city had multiple escape routes leading to hidden spaceports. Every building seemed designed to withstand attacks from weapons that did not exist. The humans had built everything as if they expected invasion at any moment. "Governor, we have a problem," announced his chief aide as she entered the office carrying urgent reports. "Our long-range patrol ships have detected unknown vessels on the edge of the system. They are massive and they do not respond to any communication attempts." Vex High turned from the window to examine the reports. The unknown ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They appeared to be constructed from dark materials that absorbed sensor beams rather than reflecting them. Their design suggested advanced technology, but followed no known architectural patterns. "Have they made any threatening moves toward our colonies?" Vex High asked. "No, sir, but they are moving with clear purpose and direction," the aide replied. "Our patrol captains report that the ships seem to be studying our defenses and mapping our settlements. Probably just another species exploring the territories the humans abandoned," Vex High said, though doubt crept into his voice. "The humans left many systems vacant when they withdrew. It is natural that other species would move in to claim resources." But even as he spoke, Vex High remembered his service during the Krex Wars when he had fought alongside human crews. The humans had been obsessed with preparation for threats that seemed imaginary. They built defenses against attacks that never came, and prepared for invasions that seemed impossible. At the time, Vex-High had thought human caution was excessive and paranoid. Now, looking at reports of unknown ships with unreadable intentions, he began to wonder if human paranoia had actually been human wisdom. "Send a patrol ship to investigate these vessels," Vex-High ordered, "but tell the captain to maintain safe distance and avoid any actions that might be interpreted as aggressive." "Yes, sir," the aide replied and hurried from the office to relay the orders. Vex-High returned to his window and looked out at the human cities his people now called home. For the first time since taking control of the former human colony, he wondered if they had made a mistake in forcing humanity to leave. The humans had built everything as if they knew something terrible was coming from the darkness between stars. Back on Earth, Dr. Walsh's monitoring screens erupted with automated alarms as sensors detected the first system going completely dark. All communication signals stopped broadcasting and all energy signatures vanished as if an entire star system had simply ceased to exist. "Director Martinez," Walsh called urgently. "We just lost all contact with the Altarian trade hub. Every signal from that system has gone silent." Martinez ran to Walsh's station and stared at the displays in disbelief. The Altarian system housed over 50 million beings across 12 planets and hundreds of space stations. It was one of the busiest trade centers in the galaxy, and its sudden silence could only mean disaster on an unimaginable scale. "Could this be equipment failure?" Martinez asked hopefully. "No, ma'am," Walsh replied grimly. "I am reading massive energy discharges consistent with planetary destruction. Whatever is out there in the void sectors has begun moving against inhabited systems." Martinez activated the emergency communication system to contact Earth Defense Command. President Foster needed to know that the galaxy was under attack and that the species who had forced humanity into isolation were about to pay a terrible price for sending away their protectors. The age of galactic peace was ending, and the darkness humanity had always watched for was finally emerging from the void between stars.